Hello everyone, and welcome to the conflict management webinar. This webinar is designed to help you have those difficult conversations. So first of all, I want to welcome back Team XYZ Bakery. You've done such a great job with the tools that I gave you for planning and strategy that your supervisor asked me to come back and give you one more tool regarding conflict resolution. First of all, if you don't know me from the last session, my name is Rebecca Dunstan. I'm a management consultant and a certified Franklin Covey facilitator. And today let's talk about what's on the agenda. So the first thing we're going to do is introduce you to conflict resolution. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go over those 7 habits of highly effective managers again that we did last time. And that's from Franklin Covey. Then we will discuss specifically the one habit that has to do with conflict resolution and demonstrate a tool that will help you deal with conflict resolution. So first of all, let's get into it and talk about conflict and where we see it at work. So the first one is difficult personalities, obviously. You have that boss or that coworker that you just don't get along with or you don't see eye to eye with. The next source of conflict is restructuring. That has to do with, companies that make drastic changes to get to those visions and goals that they set. And it may have to do with, bringing in all new management, which can cause conflict, dealing with new people. People are afraid. The next source is unclear job roles. So if John doesn't know what Bob is supposed to be doing, they could be stepping on each other's toes, which is causing conflict. The next source is inadequate training. When you don't know what you're supposed to be doing at your job, it can cause conflict with your coworkers, your supervisor. And the last one is poor communication can cause conflict. So that's what we're going to focus on when it comes down to using that tool. So let's talk about some of the different ways that you can manage conflict. So the first one is avoid, and that means you have conflict and you just do nothing about it. You want to ignore it, you hope that it goes away. Not always the best way to deal with conflict. The next is accommodate. So that means you're cooperative, but you're not assertive, which means, hey, I'm just going to do what you want to calm you down, but I'm not really going to assert myself even though your behavior isn't really appropriate or this isn't the right solution. So again, you want to achieve harmony while not creating further conflict. The next way to manage conflict is to compete. This is a very negative way to manage conflict. This is sort of, you have a conflict and no matter what, you want to be the one that's right. You want to come out on top. So no matter what, you are going to argue and argue and argue. And eventually a boss is going to probably have to step in and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to make this decision here for you because you guys can't do it. The next one is compromise. So this is, both parties have a conflict. They can't agree on something. So they give up something each, to come to a common ground. This is really a lose-lose way to manage conflict because Bob feels like he gives up something, Joe feels like he gives up something, so they're really losing in the end. And the last way to manage conflict is collaboration. So this is a high level of cooperation and assertiveness. You work through the differences to satisfy everyone's concerns. Obviously, this is the best way to deal with conflict. You get in a room, you hash it out, you say, hey, we've got a problem here, we're not agreeing. Let's talk about this for a bit until we can come to an agreement where everybody's happy with the solution. So in order to manage conflict, one of the things that we have to learn is how to listen with empathy. Okay, you really need to listen to a person and how they're feeling about the situation and understand what they're feeling in order to move forward with the conflict resolution. So empathy is the ability to project oneself into the personality of another person in order to better understand that person's emotions or feelings. So really it's that old saying, walk a mile in somebody else's shoes, where you're actually listening to the point that you can say, I understand your problem and how you feel about it. I'm interested in what you were saying and I'm not judging you. So I'm here, I know what you're feeling, I know what you're saying, I'm just open to listening. So here's some tips on what not to do when you're practicing empathic listening. And again, this comes from Franklin Covey. So the first one is don't judge. Okay, don't listen to what somebody says and make a judgment like, that's crazy, you're wrong. That's just going to shut somebody down. The next is don't probe. Okay, if somebody tells you something like, Mary said that blah blah blah, and it's a very suspicious and damning conversation that you're having, and don't say who told you that, but where did you hear that from. Don't probe, because that's also going to shut the person down. The next one is don't advise. Somebody's coming to you, they have a huge problem, you don't want to solve it for them, because you might not be at the root cause of the issue yet. So you don't want to just say, hey, you know what? You have a problem with your kids because it's interfering with your work life. Oh, call this babysitter. They can help you. There might be a deeper underlying problem, so you don't want to just tell them what to do. Again, that shuts them down. It doesn't open them up for further communication. And the last what not to do is don't bring the conversation back to you. If somebody says, I'm really hurting because so and so did this to me. Don't say, yeah, you know what? I know how you feel because that happened to me. Remember when Bob did this? Then you're just bringing it back to you, and the person feels, again, shut down. It's like, okay, well, this is supposed to be about me, but you just made it about you, so I'm not going to talk anymore. So some of the things to do when you're practicing empathic listening is you want to reflect on the content, okay? So if somebody tells you something, you really want to respond with a saying like, so what you're saying is, and then don't repeat it word for word. Try to change what they're saying into different words with the same meaning so that they know you understand what they said. Then the next thing you want to do is you want to reflect on the feeling. So you want to acknowledge what the person is feeling, and again, you're frustrated because, and then make the statement so you understand why they're feeling that way. This is going to promote more conversation from that person. So some of the times that you should use empathic listening, number one is during conflict when emotions are running high. You're going to have a conflict, so you need to really listen to what's going on and understand how people are feeling. During performance evaluations, especially if somebody's struggling, you need to listen to the reason why and understand. When dealing with customer issues and complaints, this is another issue where, or a situation where emotions are going to be running high potentially. So you want to understand what your customer is feeling, and you want to understand and listen to the facts and the issue. And the last time, or the last suggestion when to use empathic listening is when giving feedback. Okay, and when giving feedback is actually what we're going to be discussing when I talk about this next tool that I'm going to give you. So that being said, that's going to lead us back into those 7 habits for effective managers, which again are be proactive, begin with the end in mind, which is what we talked about last time, as well as put the first things first. Then you have think win-win, seek first to understand, then to be understood, synergize, and sharpen the saw. So the one we're going to be talking about right now is seek first to understand and then to be understood. So let's get right into that. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. Consequently, it is decided prematurely what the other person means before they finish communicating. You've all been in this situation where somebody starts talking, could be a heated debate or discussion, and they say, you know what, I'm really angry. And it's, before they even finish telling you why, you're formulating that response in your head. Oh yeah, you're angry? Well, I'm angry. And then you've got this internal dialogue going on where you just totally stop listening to that person. So you don't get to the heart of what the issue is. So the suggestion to cure that is just listen. And then it's important after you listen to care enough to give feedback to that person. So how we're going to do that is we're going to talk about this feedback facilitator tool. Okay, and this tool is going to help you give timely, constructive feedback. And I say timely because if somebody's telling you something, you don't want to wait a month to give them that feedback because it's just totally lost. The next thing is it's important to be specific and speak in terms of facts instead of emotions, and you'll see that section when we go over the tool. You don't want to talk about things, feelings, and how it made you feel. You want to talk about the facts of the situation, okay? That's what's important. Facts are more important than feelings when it comes to giving feedback. The other thing this tool is going to let you do is prepare for anticipated responses so you can plan how you will address them. This is planning ahead, If I give this person this feedback, what could they potentially say? And I want to prepare myself for those potential responses. And then finally, use empathic listening when hearing the responses. So let's get right into it and open our feedback facilitator. So I have a blank copy here. I'll just make that smaller so you can see it. You can see all of the questions from beginning to end, how you're going to do this, who you're going to be giving it to, when, what the issue is, and then what are the facts about those issues, okay? And what happened regarding those issues, like what was the impact that that had on the business, on yourself, on your relationship. Then here's where you get to the anticipated responses. Well, what do I think Joe is going to say if I give him this feedback, and what am I going to do about that? And then you have your follow-up on the second page. What are you going to do now that this feedback has been given? So let's go over a real scenario that I've put in here. So the first thing is answer these questions to prepare you to give feedback. So the first question is, who needs it? Well, this guy Joe needs it. He's the supervisor that I work alongside with at my company. When am I going to do it? I've set the time. I've committed to it. Tomorrow at the end of our shift, we're going to have a meeting. And what is the issue? So the issue is the last 3 safety audits that Joe was responsible for have not been submitted. The facts are that Joe and I agreed to alternate weeks when it comes to performing and submitting these safety audits. Those are the facts. This is how we said we were going to do our job. For the last 6 weeks, I have submitted my audits, but the VP of Ops has informed me that there are 3 missing, which means Joe is now pulling his weight. So notice, when it says where are the facts, I didn't say, hey, I'm really upset because I'm in trouble now, I feel that Joe isn't performing. I just went right with the facts. Okay, so what's the impact of the results, like that Joe hasn't handed in these audits? So three missing safety audits is a serious issue in the event that the Ministry of Labor were to audit our processes. This is a big deal. We could get in a lot of trouble. So another result of the actions is that the VP of Ops is now holding Joe and I both accountable for the missing audits. They're supposed to be done on our shift. We work together, so we're both taking the heat on this, which is why I need to give Joe this feedback. So here's where I go, okay, if I give him this feedback, what do I think Joe is going to say? So he could say that we didn't have the agreement. He could forget. So in order to anticipate how I'm going to respond, I'm going to make sure that I bring this original agreement. We have an email that we sent back and forth. I'm going to bring it. So if this is his response, I can say, hey, I'm going to hold you accountable. We did have this agreement. Now, he could also accuse me of saying, hey, you know what? You should have told me if you knew they weren't being done. So if he does do that, I can speak to Joe about the importance of communication. I had no idea he wasn't doing them. So he could say, well, why didn't you tell me? I could very well say the same thing. Let's talk about communication. And the last thing that Joe could potentially bring up was he could mention the personal issue at home that he's been going through, because I've heard rumors that something's going on, but he hasn't opened up to me. If he decides to do this, I'm going to bring a copy of our wellness program pamphlet to say, hey, if you are having a problem, here's something you could do. And by the way, going to that point, if he does do that, again, don't advise him. You can just simply slip him the pamphlet and say, just a reminder, you have support. Don't say, hey, call this number. I did it. That's advising. You have to let him do it on his own. Okay, so we had one action item that came out of this feedback facilitator. We want to make sure that we document that. And what we did is, Joe had committed to posting a schedule on the wall because we share a desk. And we can look at that schedule and see, oh, it's Joe's turn. Well, Joe hasn't crossed it off. So if that happens, then the other follow-up is, if we notice an audit is not checked off, we will hold each other accountable in a timely manner. And then I'll put some notes on how the feedback went. So yes, Joe did admit that he'd been preoccupied due to issues at home. He really appreciated the fact that I gave him the pamphlet. I didn't probe, I didn't advise, but I've just given him that resource. And I think we've come up with a resolution that we were both happy with and we feel will be a success. So that is an example of how to use that feedback facilitator tool. So guys, that's really great. I'm really glad that I could give you another tool as well as your planning and strategy that has to do with conflict resolution. I want you to start using that tool. And as always, if you have any questions or concerns while you're using it, you could email me at the email on your screen right now. And your supervisor is going to schedule the follow-up just like you did with the other tools to discuss your progress and see how you are being successful with your conflict resolution tool. Thanks, and have a great day.